Good night. It's about 9:45 p.m. on Wednesday, the 8th of um, October 2025. You're very welcome back to Real True Education, not fake news. This is about inflation, and this is under our education banner here. So I have often tried to explain the concept of monetary inflation to people, and very few seem to understand it. And it has amazed me, for at the age of 12, I understood exactly what it meant. It made perfect sense to me. But people seem to have a mental block to looking at the overall picture of events. Now, as an example, 33 euros. I had a look at the price indexes for 1923 when the Irish state was formed, and 33 euros lost then, or put by and hid in a hole then, if found now, would only buy one. Now, we are talking about pounds sterling at that time, it doesn't matter, units. It would only buy one. So the money now has only 1/33 of the value of what it had in 1923. In other words, a unit of currency that time would buy 33 times as much as the same unit now. There's a bridge on a road leading in here. It's just an ordinary good bridge across the river, and it was built using picks and shovels in 1913 for £20 sterling. When I joined the Gardaí way back in the 70s, my pay was £23 a week. And I was a member of the Free Clothes Association, they called it, Fortune and Cushion to Áitiúil, the reserve army known as the FCA, and we got the same pay as the ordinary army. We'd only do weekends away and protection on installations and military camps and that, and we'd be going out firing rifles and doing all kinds of things. But I was only in it for a while anyway. But my pay, I always remember back then, was £6 5 and 2 pence. £6 5 and 2 pence. Now you can multiply that by 1.27 to get it to euros, approximately by 1.18 to bring it to dollars. So my pay in the army pay that time was £6 5 and 2 pence. I don't know what an army man's pay now is, but I'd say it's 700 a week anyway. I don't know. Now we're talking per week. And I once was sent to draw the pay of a workman in the factory, and he was that was back in the late about 1970 or there, and it was 17 and 6. He was a craftsman. He was getting £17 and 6 shillings. 17 and 6, £17 and 6 shillings a week. Anyway, the main thing is inflation is the devaluation of money. Now, it's described online there as an increase in prices over a period, or a decrease in the value of money, and that's exactly what it probably is. But many people can't explain it or can't understand it. So I'm going to show you. This is a survivor. This is a milk substitute. This is where a calf or a lamb is born, and the cow or the sheep does not have enough milk, or the calf or the lamb is not able to suck. So you give them a little bit of this in a bottle, or you dose it into them, and it contains colostrum. It's called Survivor. It contains colostrum and a whole lot of other goodies. And when the calf gets it, or a lamb gets it, if he takes it in at all, he could be very, very sleepy. You'd think he was going to die. And when he gets this, within minutes, within 30 seconds, he starts shaking his ears, and you see him coming to life. The body of the lamb and the calf is designed to get the mother's milk, the beastons or the new milk, and that milk has colostrum in it, among other things, and that's what sustains their lives. So artificially giving it to them is a very good idea, and on some farms they give them a bit of it anyway to start off. It depends on whether they're able or not. Now, it comes here with all the instructions, but I want to show you the thing about it. You can't feed this, see. You can't feed it dry. You cannot feed it dry. So they send you a little measure. And so many of these for a calf, it tells you on the box, and we'll say it's 1 for a lamb. So we take 1 out here, and I have just an old glass here, and I put we'll say for a lamb, it's 3 of these. I must get more. So that's the lamb. I'm going to waste this. This is going to be wasted. So that's the dose for a lamb. I'm going to put that in there. And you give it to him in a bottle. Now, clearly you can't give a lamb powder. And the people making this can't supply it as a liquid because it needs all kinds of preservatives. By having it a dry substance like this, you can keep it indefinitely. And it's a thing I noticed in Ireland. You never can get a cream or a powdered milk. I don't know why that is. It'd be handy there in the summertime when the milk would be going off. You could have it on a cup of tea. It's the whole go in America, all the go in America. And yet we have our powdered milk. And the next thing is they'll tell you, you'd normally fill it up with warm water to put in enough. So we'll say that this is what is required here for the lamb. Now, you wouldn't be giving him all this. You'd overload his stomach and cause some problems. You only need to wet it enough to get it into a suckable liquid that will get the stuff in, and a wee bit of liquid won't do any harm because cow's milk has a lot of water in it. So a wee bit of water won't be any harm. So now I've added warm water, and I had to put warm water because to make it dissolve better. Now that's your dose for your lamb. You put this into a bottle and you give them a feed of it. And that gets them started off. Now in reality for a calf, it'll be more. We don't worry. That's it. That's all you need. So that's when your money is stable. When the government issues money in accordance with the economic requirements. So if the economy is booming and there's more and more people coming in, you have to have more people for them. So for example, in 1800 in the United States, a certain amount of money circulating would be adequate. But if there was more people coming in by 1900, you'd need a lot more money, or else that there wouldn't be enough money to go around. Now, in those times, money was linked to gold, and the government would be buying gold and extracting gold and digging gold. And in America, the money was linked to gold up until 1971. So gold is a finite resource. You just can't make it out of thin air, and it has what they call no counterparty risk. If you have money in the bank and the bank refuses to give it to you, you can't get your money out. If you have it in the post office and they won't give it to you, you won't get it out. If you lend it to someone and they won't give it back, you have trouble getting it out. But with gold, you sell it. It has a value. Anyone can buy it. It doesn't matter whether they like you or not. Now, so what happened back in the 70s and in my early years was the government began to print money. Now, I explained to you before that in most countries, they don't use just their own money. They say, oh, we need more money to develop a river, or we need to develop agriculture, or we need to give grants to people, or whatever, or we need to build buildings, or whatever, and these will be productive. If what they want to build is productive, then you're going to have businesses. So long back in about the 70s too, a lot of good companies got to start off with government grants. And that helped them get going. Some people wasted it, but some people didn't. But that was all borrowed money. That was borrowed from the market. So in a democracy, particularly where people have votes, the government borrows from the bonds, from hedge funds, pension funds, funds that save to pay teachers' pensions, workers' funds, and they pay so much a week, and it's put into a fund. And one of the safest places to put it is to lend it to the government. And so the government borrows the money that's in circulation. Now, some like communist regimes don't. Like North Korea borrows very little because they let the people starve and do it without electricity. That's a totalitarian communist state. But most, even kingdoms and that, still borrow a certain amount of money, and it's all right to borrow a bit provided you don't overdo it and you borrow for sensible things. But of course, in the last 100 years, they borrow for war and for non-productive stuff and to keep themselves in power. So what happens then is they have this much money, and that's not near enough. So they want to have a budget, as we had in Ireland recently, and they want to, the way they do in Ireland, you have skinflint budgets like the one we recently had here in 2025. And then if there's an election on the offing, they give it all away. So they pull it back and save money and then splash it out then when an election is coming. And the idiots they can't understand. They're being simply taken for a ride, as the fellow said. So now this is the correct dose for your lamb, and they need more money. So they print it out of tin air like this. They print it out of tin air and they throw that around. Now, some people will not be able to understand this concept. There is a gulf between people who can and can't. But a lot of my viewers will. Some of them are quite smart. And so, there are a lot of them smart, or they wouldn't be viewers. But what happens is you can see now that we have more in the glass. We have more in the glass, but we didn't put in any more of our stuff. We didn't put in any of this. We just put in the first spoon. First few spoons. So there's 3 spoons in it. But now you have a bigger volume. You see? So the thing is, you have more liquid, but it's still the same amount of colostrum. So you haven't changed anything. If anything, all you've done is make the lamb pee more. And if you give him too much, or you bottle it into him, or you force it to feed it into him, there's a danger it'll go down into his lungs. So you see, this is just water, and water is free, virtually. Well, sort of. Now, so then, next year they need more money, and they just print it. So they can't raise it in taxes because the money's not there, and they can borrow it off the bond markets and let people loan to them, but then they have to pay that back and they have to pay interest. So they take the easy way out and they just print it. Now you have a big glass here. It wouldn't be nice on tea. It's not a nice smell of it. Kind of like a very strong milky smell, and you can smell the colostrum. New milk. The first milk of a cow or a heifer is yellow. It's not white. It goes white after about 4 days. So you see the concept. This is just water. We'd say worthless. The same amount of dose is here. So the lamb likes about this much. Well, now he's getting all this. So if they give you or they pay you this, you're not getting this. You're only getting water. And that is inflation. That is printed money when there's nothing there to back it up. There's no value in the economy. If they had a great boom in the economy, then there might be justification in the government printing a bit of money to leave more in circulation and to give the government a bit of money, and that the strength of the economy would make this worth a bit more. And then your foreign exchange would be worth a bit more. When you go to exchange your Irish money for some other currency like Iceland, you get a better rate. You with me on that? So I think that explains inflation to you. Gold and silver are seen as money without counterparty risk. And normally people buy it and buy it and buy it. If you have irresponsible runaway inflation, then gold and silver are indeed great assets to have if you have the money to buy it, and if you can afford it, and if you have a place to store it. And really, you can't store it anywhere other than in a vault and pay. You have to pay insurance on it. It's not free to keep either in big amounts, but But the thing is that a lot of the banks of the world have a lot of gold now. So gold has a value, even though Warren Buffett makes the point, you spend years digging out of the ground and then you hide it under the ground in a vault. Silver is useful too. Both are useful industrially. Silver is actually more useful. I use silver doing my brazing, and I'm thinking of buying more silver solder and a stock of it, because it could get scarce, could get very expensive. I don't know. But now sometimes then you get a buzz. Gold has been rising in price, and so has silver. But sometimes that's mostly the banks and big investment companies that are buying it. The public generally are not buying it yet. But if you got a situation where there was a bit of inflation with a bit of progress and a reasonably good economy, the EU strives for 2% inflation. So if you had a reasonable level and it wasn't too bad, and they managed to pull back inflation by better government policies and wiser governments and all that, you would then have a situation where the paper money, no receipt, I don't know, have any of me here. I turned off the background light, it was very bright there. So anyway, if the paper money might hold its value if they didn't print too much of it. And if they didn't print too much of it, and people bought loads of gold and drove the price of gold up too high, you get to a stage where the gold wasn't worth as much as the money, and the price would come down. So you could lose a lot. But generally speaking, the price of gold goes up because governments can't help printing money. But just if you happen to buy it at its peak, we say it goes up to, what is it now? It's about $3,050 or something like that an ounce. So if it went up to, we say it went up to $20,000, and someone bought it at 20, and government got their act together and started running the thing right, the price of gold and silver could technically come down and you could lose money. During the Spanish Inquisition, when they went over and stole all they could find in South America, they brought back so much gold that it depressed the price of gold in Europe. Gold wasn't worth what it used to be because there was a flood of gold, there was too much of it. But by and large, the amount of gold and silver is scarce and will remain scarce, and has always been for thousands of years valuable. It's a money thing. And governments, generally speaking, are prohibited from taxing the transfer and the movement of gold and silver, because gold and silver is actually money. It's the only thing that is actually money. They're considered money, and the laws all talk about gold and silver price coins. So here is a €10 note, and if they don't print them, they'd stay the same value. That would buy the same now, it did 20 years ago, and will buy the same in 20 years' time. But of course, the reality is that at the turn of the century, in the year 2000, when all the excitement was on about the millennium, and that would buy about, that there now would buy €30, let's say, about €30 worth. Now it'll only buy 10, and in 3 years' time it'll only buy 2. I would say the time is rapidly approaching when an ordinary loaf of bread will be €10. So in that situation, gold and silver is an investment, but so is land. Anything which is an asset, and anything which keeps its value. Now you might say, why not buy a tractor? Not the same, they become obsolete. Antiques are all right, but they're not in the same bracket. If you have gold, it never becomes obsolete because it's not manufactured. You can't buy food as an asset because it goes off. Clothes goes off. A good quality shotgun. I seen a fellow wanting buying 2 Browning highly decorated shotguns, good quality ones, and he told me they were going straight into a safe in London. He was never going to fire them. They were just a keepsake. But they are slightly obsolete because the gun has developed. That shape of gun had a thick breech that height, and by Browning, and they were the state of the art. But now they're taken over by they're bypassed and made obsolete by the Perazzi model with the shallower breech and a slightly better gun. So even they are not holding their value, in that a person going out to shoot might not buy that type of gun now because it's somewhat obsolete. Good quality English shotguns are hold their value, double barrel. They do kind of hold their value, although the steel in the barrels is not as good as nowadays. They can rust if you're not careful. That's not a good example. Antique cars and that are not a good example. A genuine old antique might have a value, but generally speaking, land, gold and silver, or something which doesn't change its value. Cattle are hold their value, but you have to mind them. And that's the thing. And land has to be minded. If you don't mind it, you could lose it under adverse possession, Scottish rights, and it grow weeds and all that. So there's a bit of work to keep in land, whereas there's nearly nothing to keep in gold except security. Now, I just want to make that quite clear. In this case, we had about that much liquid, which was the proper amount for which you pay, let's say, €1 for that measure. I don't know what that box is about 13 euros. So €1, but that measure we'll say. And then we put in the water. That's what you should be getting for €1. You cannot make it go further by simply putting in water. You're cheating. And it is a form of taxation. But in other ways it suits. For example, a person who can get a mortgage for a house, and we'd say get a house, let's say 200,000. In 5 years' time, that house might be worth 600,000. So so you have a better asset, but also it's easier paying your mortgage because you're earning more. As more money is printed, if you're working, let's say driving a lorry, you're getting a higher pay all the time to keep up with inflation. So therefore, it's easier paying your mortgage, and I benefited from that way back years ago when inflation left my first house. I mean, it's laughably cheap by today's standards, but it meant that my pay when I was in the Gardaí, my pay was I was getting it hard to pay the mortgage, and then as I got on, and there was recessions back in the 1980s. As I got on, I found that my pay increased and I was able to pay my mortgage better. So it benefits people like that. Who it really hits is savers. Somebody who has a big lump of money in the bank, they have kept their confirmation money, they have it saved in this, that and the other. They lose because the government is just forcing in more money. So when they we'll say they sold their house, or they got a legacy or whatever, or they won the lotto, that's what their euro was worth. That's what the size of it, that's what it was worth. Now it's all water. So it's taken all of this money to buy this bit now. So the money will not buy as much. And that's a very important thing to understand about inflation. The value of the money goes down. What they call the purchasing power, the buying power of your money decreases because of inflation. And the good example is that from 1922 to now 2024, the value of the pound in Ireland is gone down 33 times. So it's 33 times. So that's the best way I can explain it. I remember we'd be getting pay rises when I was in working. We'd be getting pay rises and the prices going up, and they'd be shouting on the union, oh, prices are going up. We need to keep ahead of inflation. We need to keep up there. We can't live if we don't get increases, and they give increases. And I remember one time there was an increase given of 21% because there was some special case made, and they were hopping up and down. But within 18 months, that 21% was gobbled up. Prices had gone up. Do you understand? Now, I just wanted to make that clear to you all, folks, under our educational heading, so that you can understand it. I remember back in the years in the 70s explaining inflation like that to farmers and people of all kinds, and I never met one who could understand it. How could the government print money? You just press the button on the machine. Milton Friedman was an economist, and he had a program on the television years and years ago, and he went into the Federal Reserve where they print the money, and it was printing away their dollars like hell, and he says, this is how you stop inflation, and he pressed the red button, and he stopped the machine printing money. That's all you have to do. But that's the theory of it. That's not so easy. The government has to pay its staff, it has to pay its wages, it has to pay everything, pay its army, and pay for its wars. And now in Europe, we were hoping for 2% inflation. Now they're going to take on Putin. They're going, even if they don't fight Putin, they're going to spend 5% of their GDP, which is a colossal sum, just building up weapons and armies and all of that. And what are they going to do? I don't know. But that's going to leave people poorer. You're going to see warnings that people won't have the same pensions. They'll have to work longer. But that's because the economy is gutted. There's no industry in the economy. You need industry. You need to be making things. You need to be making balers. You need to be making cars. You need to be making engines. You need to be making whiskey and exporting it, and beer and stout and exporting it. You need to be making beef, which I do every day, and you need to be letting that into the market, and that's bought, and then it becomes raw material for exporting, and that's money coming in. So you need that in your economy, otherwise your economy stagnates. And in Europe, it's all stagnation. They're not able to make anything. They're not able to make anything because they have deliberately crippled industry and made it a criminal thing, and also a social crime to burn fuel and therefore to make commodities. And so there's no value. So when they make print money in the Euro factory or the Euro bank, it's water. It's the same as water. There's a little bit of stuff in the bottom of it, but it's diluted away down to blazes. Whereas long ago, when there was industry and Germany was making cars and lorries and Daft trucks and all these trucks and Opel cars and all of that, well, there was value. You were getting some white stuff in your water. There was something in it. Now there's nearly none. And there is a service economy where the government actually provides services and there's insurance and all that. But in the end of the day, unless you have goods being made, tangible goods, like I've just mentioned, well, your economy is not going too well. We have some tangible things. Tangible means you can touch it, can be touched. A real object, that jug is tangible, so that can be touched. Now, the air is not tangible. So an idea is not tangible. So the thing is that I think now you understand that concept of inflation, and you can see it all around you. And they do print the consumer price index, to CPI. It's not that bad, but sometimes they take things out which should be in it. They don't put in certain stuff which should be in it. And if they do that, then I might tell you separately. There's no point here. But you can see it yourself. You can see it when you go into the shop. How much that would buy at the turn of the century. We joined the euro in 2002. Maybe somebody have an old box of something at home, box of salt or something, and it might be stamped on it, and we can check today. But I would say that's only a third of what it was back then. And that means that if you had €1,000 in the bank, since then it's now only worth 333. Folks, that's your wee bit of a talk for tonight. Thank you very much for listening. Now that should put that to bed, and when I talk to my subscribers about inflation, they'll now know what it is. It's an increase in prices coupled with a devaluation of the currency. Some people say it's not a bit of harm. It doesn't matter. It does wear out shoes, because you're going into this shop. Oh, how much is them shoes? They're 32, and up the road they're only 27. And when you go down to the shop, they were 27. They're now up to 38 because the price is going up so quick. And in Germany during the Weimar Republic, inflation was so bad that you could buy a good house in Berlin, somewhere in Berlin, for $100. The money was absolutely useless. It was only like this, here's an old supermarket label. It's just worthless. They were carrying it home in wheelbarrows. Will that happen again here in Ireland and in Europe and in America? Huge debt. they're printing this money to pay debt. And just before I leave, the modern way of banking is when you get a loan from a bank, they give you the loan, they print this out of thin air. There's no money there. They create this on a computer screen and they give you this, to credit you with this money. And then you pay back the interest, and you pay more interest in the beginning. And after the end of it, we'd say it's a 10-year loan, you pay back the principal. You see, and they're losing money that way because what you're paying back is worth less. So that's how they do. Then when you pay back your loan, they take this out. So we'd say there's 1,000 in the bank when they give you this. There's now 1,010. Right, there was 1,000. They print this. Now there's 1,010, and you pay it back. And at the end of the 10 years, let's say you have it fully paid back, they then take this out of the money system, and you're back to the same amount of money you had before. That's the theory of it. In reality, they don't take the money out because they need it to pay their staff. They can't get it for anywhere else. And that's now a bit of an explainer to you. I went to a good lot of trouble. Don't worry if you can't grasp it. Some people can't. To me, it's just second nature. I fully understand it. Why wouldn't you print money? Sure. Then the question is, why don't they give a money printer machine to everybody? Why don't they give a little thing that you could just print your money off? And of course, the answer to that is that would leave the money worthless because everyone would have it. It has to be scarce. And the best way of keeping it scarce is to link it to gold. In 1971, President Nixon in America changed from gold to the Saudi Arabian oil. So oil was the backup for the currency. The currency was worth oil. And that's another thing. Oil will keep a certain amount. So oil is a sort of an asset as well. But it's a moving asset, you have to store it, and there's a big storage cost. So I think you have that. Have I left that out? I hope not. I hope that makes you understand. If you don't understand inflation, you're not at the races at all. I don't care who you are. There's nobody living without money. Nobody. So, folks, we'll see you back soon. The gold and the silver was currency 6,000 and 7,000 years ago. In ancient Egypt, we know that because when they buried their kings and pharaohs, they adorned their grave with gold and silver and precious stones, things that were scarce. That was to show what they thought of him or her. You understand? So gold and silver has been a long-term valuable asset, and I think will always be. So we'll see you now back. My mouth's a bit dry, so that's it. You see the point. You can come along now. Now you see the water here. See that? Now, what if I do? If you want more stuff for your calf, just spill that in there. Now look what I have. Look at all the water now. But there's still only 3 little spoons in it. It's no value. And some people cannot understand that. That you couldn't really give that to a lamb. There's really nothing in it. Too much water. And the system wouldn't deal with it. So you're being cheated by inflation. It's a form of tax. But I think I've explained it as best I can. We'll see you back soon. Thank you very much. Comment underneath. I know it might have been a bit boring. 33 minutes. I don't like it. But anyway, we'll see you back. Good luck.